classmate who passed away in January during her first year of graduate studies. She was a very hard worker and was determined to leave the world a better place, and she will be greatly missed.
Good morning. My name is Deanna Nick. This is Ashley Mullen, and our presentation today is entitled Rescued and Rehabilitated: Services for the Survivors of Human Trafficking. Human trafficking affects an estimated 2.5 million people around the globe every year, and victims come from all walks of life. But one thing they all have in common is their loss of freedom. Tennessee House Bill 622 and its identical counterpart, Senate Bill 1073, advocate for restoring victims' freedom by providing them with needed rehabilitative services. Human trafficking is the exploitation of someone against their will, and it's typically for the purposes of labor or sex. And as social workers, we recognize that this is a problem. The biggest problem is that human trafficking exists in the first place. But within the broader problem, we realize that there are a limited scope of services for victims. The services that do exist are delivered poorly, and because human trafficking is surrounded with so much secrecy, victims rarely identify themselves, so there's a great need for victim empowerment. And according to a 2011 report done by Vanderbilt, rehabilitative services are one of the keys to solving the human trafficking puzzle. Anyone at all can become a victim of human trafficking, but there are some populations that are at greater risk. Those include immigrants, both documented and undocumented, homeless or runaway youth, victims of trauma or abuse, and others who are marginalized, oppressed, and impoverished. The good news is that Tennessee currently ranks as a Tier 1 state according to Polaris Project, a leader in the fight against human trafficking. And that means that we have already passed significant legislation combating human trafficking in our state, but we need to continue improving and implementing those laws. If you'll notice, some of our surrounding states have not achieved that Tier 1 status. So as we continue improving our laws, we can continue being a leader in our region in the fight against human trafficking. Current Tennessee policy has a code in place for the Department of Human Services to submit a plan to provide services for the victims of human trafficking. And that plan includes, but isn't limited to, identifying victims, identifying services, and coordinating the service delivery. Tennessee House Bill 622 and Senate Bill 1073 advocate for adding rehabilitative services to the current provisions. It doesn't delete any of the original ones, but it adds the rehabilitative services that we've mentioned as being so important. The strengths of this policy are that it creates a government presence versus the idea that our government doesn't care. It establishes the coordination of services so victims don't fall through the cracks, and it includes the rehabilitative services that we've mentioned already as being one of the keys. The cost is that who pays for the rehabilitative services, and also because human trafficking causes such a unique form of trauma, service providers such as social workers and other helping professionals need proper training to treat the victims. And if the victims are so difficult to identify, how do we ensure that they are receiving the services that this legislation is providing? So as social workers, why do we care about this? Human trafficking goes against everything that our profession values. We need to ensure that victims are provided services without moral judgment or bias, and they are in need of these services because they have been dehumanized and commodified. Social justice has been taken from them. They've also been stripped of their dignity and worth. The important, positive human relationships in their lives have been stripped from them and replaced with ones of fear and control. And in order to have the integrity that our profession requires, when we realize that this is going on in our state, we have to stand up and do something about it. And in addition to that, we also have to make sure we educate and train ourselves so that we serve these victims in our state, in our practices, with competence. Our recommendations, first and foremost, are that these bills be passed. We would also like to ensure that victims are served without stipulation, such as having to testify in court. We also would like to see education and funding for that education included in legislation so that we can be adequately prepared. And we also want to see services provided in a safe and secure environment, even if that means the relocation of a victim that's afraid of their perpetrator. We support the creation of a human trafficking screening tool that can be given to victims of domestic violence, rape, those charged with prostitution, to assess if they could possibly be a victim. And we also encourage the cross-disciplinary coordination between social workers, other helping professionals, law enforcement, and legislators, and community members as well. Working together, we can shine a light on human trafficking in our state, we can end it, and we can make sure that Tennessee's human trafficking victims get the rehabilitative services that they need to help them on the road to healing.